All right, in this video, we're going to take just a few minutes here and try to work through how we would convert fractions, decimals, and percentages back and forth. If you could look at my title page here, I have fractions, decimals, and percents, and I've tried to indicate with a two-way arrow that we're going either direction: fractions to decimals, decimals to fractions, decimals to percents, or percents back and forth, and really trying to get students to be comfortable converting between any of these. When I have a chance to talk to students, I like to tell students that these are really the same thing, just expressed in different ways, and hopefully we can illustrate that as we work our way through here. So first of all, in this first example, we're going to change a fraction, and I've got an arrow going this way to a decimal and then change it to a percent. I think when we look at something like 3/8, we have to remember that not only is this a fraction, which is what a lot of people see this as, but it is also a vertical division problem. This fraction bar is also a division symbol, so 3/8 is really the same as 3 divided by 8. And certainly using long division or using a calculator, we could take 3 divided by 8, and if we do that, it turns out to be 0.375, which has allowed us then to change, simply using division, this fraction to a decimal. Now when it comes to changing a decimal to a percent, we need to multiply by 100. So if we want to go this way, it's going to be times 100, which if you're comfortable with that, that's simply going to move the decimal 2 spots to the right. So if the decimal point is here, multiplying by 100 is going to move it 2 over, and this would then become 37.5%. So if I look at what I really did here, I started with a fraction that was 3/8, and I remembered that 3/8 is 3 divided by 8, so I let the calculator do that work, and it told me that that decimal turns out to be 0.375, so I was able to change the fraction to the decimal. At that point, I wanted to change to a percent, so then I had to remind myself that I multiply by 100, which slides the decimal over 2 spots to the right, making it 37.5%. So if I'm going from a fraction to a decimal, it's a matter of simply dividing. If I'm going from a fraction to a percent, I need to change that fraction to a decimal and then change it to a percent, ending up being a 2-step process there. If I look at my second page here, I'm going to deal with, this time I'm going to start over here on the right with a percentage, and if you notice my arrows are going the other way, I want to change from a percent to a decimal and change back to a fraction. So if I look at that, I have to remember what I did on the previous page, and if I multiplied by 100 to go from a decimal to a percent, I'm going to divide by 100 to go the other direction, which is going to move the decimal 2 spots to the left. And remembering that that decimal point is really right there, 2 spots to the left is going to move beyond the 6 and the 2 to 0.26 or 26 hundredths. What I just said there, 26 hundredths, is the key, because if I say this properly, 26 100ths is the fraction. And I think that's really the big key, is when you have a decimal, we often say that as 0.26, and I think we all understand what it is, but if we say that properly, 26 100ths, that's really the fraction. Yes, that simplifies. 2 goes into the top 13 times, and it goes into the bottom 50 times, so there's the simplified version. But again, in this, when I was at the percentage, I moved the decimal, which was just to the right of the 6, I moved it 2 to the left, dividing by 100 to make it into a decimal. I said the decimal properly and was able to change that to 26 over 100, which simplified to 13 over 50. I also have to remember, and I did this in a previous video, that when we have 26%, that's really 26 per CENT. And if we remember, the word PER means divided by, and CENT is a prefix that means 100. So when you say 26%, you really are saying 26 divided by 100, which also could be written that way. So we are able to go from percentages to fractions immediately using this little process down here. If we know that percent means divided by 100, we're able to write it as this and then simplify to 13 over 50. The last part of this that I just want to take a minute or so to discuss here is, if we have a decimal, and we're talking about, in this case, decimals to fractions, calculators nowadays have a lot of abilities in terms of being able to help us out in some of these situations. And I know we can say, oh, that's 34 100ths, and that maybe simplifies to 17 over 50, but I also want you to be aware of the power of the calculator. Graphing calculators, you can put 0.34 on the screen or 0.34 on the screen. If on a graphing calculator you go to the math menu, there should be an item that looks something like this. When you click the math menu on a texted instrument graphing calculator, there's an item that's got an arrow to frac, and that simply means convert to a fraction. If you highlight that and bring it back, it would on the screen have something like this, 0.34, and it's saying 0.34 converted to a fraction, and if you hit enter, it would automatically give you the fraction being 34 over 100, or it will always give you the simplified answer, which in this case would be 17 over 50. So graphing calculators and even scientific calculators have that ability. I gave you an example here using the graphing calculator. Many of the scientific calculators, there's a 0.34, and there is a button that will convert F to D back and forth, which means fractions and decimals back and forth. Often it's a second function. It might take second and that button, and it will convert then to 17 over 50. The last thing is a repeating decimal. In this case, we have 0.2, and I hope everyone's okay that that's the decimal that looks like that, 0.2 with a bunch of them repeating. It is not 2/10 because we have another 2 here and another 2 here. But again, there's an algebraic process which you'll learn along the way, but if you're not aware of that, you can type this in on a graphing calculator. And I just simply tell students that when they type this in on a graphing calculator, if this is the screen of my calculator, I need to make sure that I put enough 2's that I go all the way across the screen. That allows the calculator to establish that it's a repeating decimal. It's not necessarily the number of 2's I have here, but if I complete one line on the screen with that, and then I'm out of space here, but I would just simply show it here. Again, I would go to math, as I talked about in the previous problem, and get the convert to fraction button, and it would have all of these 2 as a string with the arrow to fraction right behind it, and if I hit enter, it's going to tell me that my answer is 2/9. So the graphing calculator is able to help me out in this case and convert either a decimal that terminates, it doesn't repeat, it's able to help me convert that to a fraction, as well as a repeating decimal converted to a fraction. I hope this helps you out dealing with a little bit about fractions, decimals, and percents.